everyone. Welcome to Fun Problems, the problems of fun. I'm Peter C. Brandon.
I'm AJ Hayward.
And we are launching straight back into part 2 of my talk, Why Your Selling Game Won't Good.
Why your good game won't sell. I'm actually impressed.
I have popcorn,
you scrambled it on the spot there. Oh, perfect. Your nice crunchy snack that you'll eat very loudly.
Popcorn is the choice for movie theaters because it is not noisy. That's why they do popcorn at movie theaters.
Well, what about the bag? Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch.
We'll see. That's why I showed it. It's a nice. Look at
that. All right. We'll allow
it. So when we last met, this is part 2 of AJ's 2018 presentation about, I want to say, like, game product design from a retailer perspective.
Yeah.
Now, you're no longer a retailer, but you still have a lot of interesting insights, and that talk is no longer online because it got copyright struck or something crazy.
I think I know what it was, and that comes up later in my talk. So we'll see if I have to skip a slide or something.
The deep racism. Just the incredible, how many slurs you put into 14 seconds was like Eminem level impressive.
And like Eminem, I get a free pass, baby.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about boxes on shelves. Is that an accurate way to put it?
Yes. So I was just complaining about the box design of Catacombs. Since we cut, I probably should have put up, the good box that I helped redesign for Catacombs, but I didn't. You still have to look in the show notes for that. But now we're on to good boxes. So this one I pulled separately from the presentation because in the physical presentation, I had props. I don't have those here. This was, at the time, one of the best backup boxes that I could think of. Today, I think it's a little lacking in some areas. I probably would have complained about them back then as well, but for the most part, it does a couple things really well, including something that I bet Peter won't even be able to notice.
Ooh.
So, things I think it does a little poorly. I think there's too much text. 3 paragraphs of explanation as to like what the deal is with the game. That's a bit much. The new rules being included makes sense. Oh, sorry, audio listeners. So the back of the box has 3 paragraphs of what you're doing in the game.
They probably could have inferred that.
Yeah.
3 paragraphs of text is too much. Audio listeners, there are 3 paragraphs of text.
Yeah, I didn't say what it was about, though. It's like the sales pitch of the game. It does say that
there
it includes
one sentence here that I think they would not put today, but was vitally important when this game first came out.
Is it to do with pandemic stuff?
No. Oh, yeah, that's funny. I didn't even think of that. Pandemic is a cooperative game. All players win or lose together.
Right.
That was absolutely like barely a thing when this game came out.
Yeah, I remember like that was the selling point of the game. It's like, whoa, right. We work together? That's crazy. That's not a thing.
Can you hear my crunching, by the way? I know that people hate eating sounds so much.
I am not hearing you. My comment before was more worried about if it shows up on the audio, but I'm sure it'll be fairly quiet.
I just know that like the number one pet peeve of podcast listeners is eating sounds, so I don't want to ruin the second half of your presentation with popcorn munching.
Maybe just mute your mic between when you're talking.
I'm not going to do that.
Fair enough. All right, so moving on. The big thing that this does that I really like is on the back of the box, it has step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1, treat diseases before they spread. Step 2, meet up to collect cards. Step 3, discover the cure for diseases, cure all diseases to win. Now, Pandemic does have some pretty abstract concepts going on, so like understanding exactly what's going on is a little bit weird, but you get rid of some cubes, you get cards, you cure the disease. At least that's like an understandable process, step 1, step 2, step 3, as to what you're doing over the course of the game. I think that the exact explanation could be refined or possibly much improved by other games that have easier to understand turn cycle. But for the most part, I think that sort of structure really helps to break down the game into bite-sized parts and help people understand it. Any thoughts on that?
When we did the What is a Sell Sheet episode, I brought up Mightier Than the Sword, my co-design with local game designer Matt. And that's the thing that I think we didn't have, that I could never get on there, like that 1, 2, 3. I like that kind of oversight, that's not the right word, bird's eye view of the game, where it's just like, here's the things you have to care about, done. Like, that's almost all I want, frankly. And I feel like I never managed to capture that. So I think that's a really interesting. I'm thinking about this from a perspective of sell sheets. I think that's a really interesting like feature.
Yeah, if you'll
I don't
notice,
disagree with anything you said.
a lot of my sell sheets, what I tried to do was have the speech bubbles and have 3 speech bubbles, and the first, and in reading comprehension order, left to right, top down, you would say, do this, do this, do this, and ideally you would get a feel for the game from those 3 speech bubbles. That was sort of the platonic ideal I was always reaching towards, whether or not I actually got there. There is one big thing on here that they have that is still rare today, but is surprisingly valuable to hardcore gamers. Can you tell what that is? I bet you can't.
2 new roles.
The answer.
Let me have a guess. I'm really curious about this. So something on here that is not common, and you think is best for hardcore gamers?
Yeah.
I don't know. What is it?
Recommended card sleeves. Just saying these are the sleeves that you need to go with this game. So
Where
convenient.
does it say that?
Recommended card sleeves 3 gray game gen.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's.
Do you think it was like a sponsorship deal?
I definitely think that there's got to be something going on there for that specific brand, but it doesn't matter because people who sleeve their games know the equivalent of all the different brands, at least for the four most common ones: the standard card, standard euro, mini euro.
So interesting. I'm not anti-sleeving, but as a company, Jellybean Games has never made sleeving a consideration. Like all of our games, we've never printed a poker card. All of our games are bridge cards, mini cards, and tarot cards, and you can obviously get sleeves for those. But if we were sleever friendly, we would never do bridge cards. We'd always do poker cards. And so once we kind of made that choice earlier, I was like, cool, we are not accommodating sleevers. Like our games don't necessarily fit all the cards sleeved or, whatever else. It's not a priority for me. So I would never put that on the box, but I fully understand the appeal.
Yeah, it's something where, you're never going to lose customers because it doesn't say it's on the box. But people are going to immediately appreciate it, have a nice association there, feel like they're seen, because a lot of sleevers feel like, honestly, like I don't want to overstate this, but they feel like second-class citizens in a way. And part of that...
I feel like sleevers are so entitled.
Well,
we're coming at this from opposite perspectives. I also hate putting anything in the rulebook or the box that doesn't need to be there. We don't list playtesters. We barely list staff. Like, I just don't like stuff. It's like I was talking about it last episode with the on writing well. Like, if I can cut something, I want to cut it. Unless that, like, I think the cost of every word that you add to your rulebook, to your box, to your cards is so expensive that if I like having a list of playtesters, cool. That one person will find their name there and be like, look, I'm in this rulebook. Why are you subjecting potentially millions of other people to that?
Yeah, and I think part of this comes down to targeting. If the game is targeting only the hardcore audience or primarily hardcore audience, it's a super big, heavy euro, much more reasonable to have that on there. If it's a more mass market game, much less
like
of
Pandemic.
a need value to have it. Yeah. But like people would literally look at it and be like, oh, that's so convenient. I love that, because they're into sleeving. It also telegraphs to players that you probably thought about that in terms of the box. And this is something that I think I get into later in the presentation. But if you have a box that has cards and has some sort of insert that players are intended to use post opening the box, having that tiny little bit of extra space for card sleeves is going to make people so happy to sleeve their games. And for people who don't sleeve their games, it's not like it hurts the cards having a few extra millimeters. All it does is make it easier for you to get your fingers in. So
it is I would call sleevers an incredibly vocal minority, which is not to say like you should ignore them, but I think they are a minority, but I think that they dominate so many conversations.
Fair enough.
So it's worth considering them. I'm on your side here.
Yeah. So this goes into displaying the game. This is something this is something I think about so much, and something I'm very glad that we can bend AEG's ear on, that we've already talked to them about, is how to present your game. Man, I'm getting fired up just looking at the slide. So what
this
you're
one
seeing,
angers you?
No, no, no. I'm getting fired up, like pumped, like excited.
Oh, gotcha.
So this is a picture of Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and 2, both with their 2 parts. So Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is a blue box, Season 2 is a red box, and if you put them side by side horizontally, then they create a panoramic picture, kind of.
I love
and
that.
same with the Season 2, they create a panorama, and all 4 of them put together create like one big panorama. To an extent.
Big circle. Yeah,
to an extent. And this is really interesting because it creates, and for those who aren't familiar, there's no difference between them. Pandemic Legacy Season Red is red. Pandemic Legacy Season 1 blue.
I thought there were differences in like choices or paths or something like that.
Nope.
I thought it was like the Pokemon games.
Same game.
Huh. I had literally no idea.
But this does a few things. So first off, this is interesting because it's a legacy game. You play it once and you're done.
Right.
So by having the 2 that feel like they're connected like that, it makes people much more likely to buy the second one because they're like, well, I can play through again, make different choices, and look how nice they look together. It feels like they fit together in a way. And as a retailer, it creates an amazing display. Now, they're huge. So and they don't fit in the display format on calyxes, which is what we used, but a lot of store shelves are wider and you can put them beside each other where they create the panorama. That is so unbelievably attention grabbing. It's very impressive. And it makes people say, hey, what's the deal with this game? I had so many people say, what's the deal with this game? And with the game that we have with AEG right now, we've been talking about product design a little bit. And something I'm very excited about
a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, incessantly for months, yes.
Yeah. And the big thing that I'm talking to them about is trying to get the product in a way that it can be displayed like this, and communicating how to display your product to retailers is also really appealing. For instance, with booster boxes for Magic, this is super common. You have a cardboard box in shrink wrap, but then if you sell individual boosters, you take off the shrink wrap and you open the box. But the way that you open the box is the lid becomes this thing that stands up vertically. It folds back in.
I love that.
Yeah, and creates this beautiful picture, very appealing, very easy to see. And doing those sorts of things makes it really easy for the retailer to sell the game. That is, I think, the number one way that you can sell extra copies easily is by coming up with a way to have better shelf presence. And the thing is, most games don't do this. Right. If you do something as good as Pandemic Legacy Season 1 or 2, then you're going to get retailers pushing your game really hard because it's so easy for them to. It's going to sell itself. It's incredible.
We never got the funding for it because Robotopia failed the first time and then like scraped by the second time. But when we were back in the AJ days at Jellybean Games, we wanted to do this thing that no one's done. I really wish someone could. I think it's so cool. Of like the box has like I don't even know how you describe it, like a hinged lid on top of the lid. So you've got the box, but you can open it up, and now there's like a full art display to like show off the world. Stuff like that. I'm always thinking about.
There's a little bit of that in some like really old games from like the 90s or whatever. Like HeroScape had that big door that you can open and see some stuff in. But yeah, modern games not doing it at all. Part of that probably has to do with packaging, like shrink wrapping and stuff like that.
Right.
Because then you have to figure out a way to not get it damaged on shelves without having that. But nowadays, I'm going to
talk about. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say nowadays more and more games are moving away from shrink wrapping for environmental concerns. So you can probably get away with it a bit more easily.
I'm going to talk about Allplay again, A, because I work with them a bunch, but B, I think that they are top 3 companies in terms of product, like Stonemaier, Cardboard Alchemy, Allplay. Like they just get product to this incredible degree. So I've got a game with them, Fiction, which is a Wordle-style guessing game based around books. I've got a game with them, Things in Rings, which is a Venn diagram guessing game themed around Dr. Seuss. And they picked up Wordsy that we mentioned last episode by Gil Hover. And they deliberately made a countertop display, or I don't know if they did, but they were planning on talking about making a countertop display with those, like for those 3 games. So the store could order a set of how, like, whatever it is, 4 of each, and it would come in a box because it needs to come in a box anyway. But like the Magic things, it opens up, and now it's a countertop display for your book themed games because they work a lot with Barnes and Noble. Really cool. I love that kind of thing.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome.
Not a sponsor.
Now, feel free to make fun of me as much as you want.
Are we still on boxes? I got some box stuff.
This is still box related stuff. This is like the front cover.
Graphic design 101. Clear, colorful, striking, clean, jaw-dropping, unique, energy/scene, using the layered approach, like a haircut.
So, me and Peter will be the first to tell you I'm very bad at graphic design. But I know bad graphic design when I see it.
Do you? Have you seen your graphic design, AJ?
You've also seen when I try really hard.
You disappeared for a second, though.
I think I bumped the camera.
Ah.
But yeah, it's still working, right?
Yep.
Take a quick check.
Carry
on. But yeah, anyway, enough defending my graphic design because it doesn't.
Or rather, not enough really attacking your graphic design. It's the sidereal confluence of graphic design. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basic things that you want. This is talking about the front cover of the box. Someone looks at the box. What do they see? So this bleeds into art and that kind of thing, which, it's really all of it combined, right? You want your front cover to be clear. You don't want a lot of different things happening and it to be very muddy. People just walk right past this boxes. By the way, again, my retailer perspective, I have seen hundreds or thousands of boxes, and I can tell you which ones people pick up and which ones do not. So trust me on this. You want something that is colorful. If it's just like a bunch of muted browns and grays, it just gets completely passed over. People don't even think about it. You want to have something that is striking, high contrast. Yep, go ahead.
I want to keep going. I'm talking about Dracula's Feast.
All right, I'll finish off this slide and then I'll let you jump in. So, you want something striking. You want something clean. Again, if it's really muddy, there's a lot of different things happening. It gets lost in the water. Jaw dropping, ideally. If someone sees a really gorgeous painting or something, that is the number one way that you sell your game is by the front cover looking amazing and someone saying, "Wow, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to check it out." And again, this is step one. You haven't made the sale yet. You're catching someone's attention. Having something unique. If you just have a generic fantasy person fighting, you can have the best artist in the world, but they're going to be like, cool, another generic fantasy fighting thing. Like, it's just going to glaze over. You want to have a lot of energy or like a scene. You are imagine like you freeze frame a really exciting moment. If you think of the TV show Arcane, every one of those like slow-mo shots where like the characters are coming to punch each other and it just slows to a crawl, those are really energetic and give you a good sense of scene. Think of those, and those will do well. And then the last one is the layered approach, which is just presenting the important information and the important pictures largely, and the less important stuff small. Go ahead, Peter.
So the game I was talking about last time, Dracula's Feast, there's an artist from back in the day called Eduard Matei. He did a bunch of like gothic cool stuff, and he had this really distinctive inking style that we aped for Dracula's Feast. So this is the cover of the original Dracula's Feast. It's we were inspired by his, specifically, like he normally only worked in black and white, but when he did book covers, he would have a single block color. So you can see this is all just black and white inking with just a highlight color, what's it called, feature color, whatever it is, an accent color. And this was so divisive. Like, I love it. I think this is such a good-looking game. I think the style's really good. We've got 10 characters in the game, 8 characters in the game. I can't remember how. I think 10. All done in this style, all with one accent color. And then we did the expansion, which is very similar. So it's all like, and this was inked by our artist. Like, she used an iPad, but it was still like every line that you see here was drawn by a human in the style of Eduard Matei. So it's such a labor of love. Crazy divisive, and people called it cheap. And I was just like, I don't see how you can think of this as cheap. Like, it's got this legacy. It's got like this classic feeling. It is more labor intensive than a lot of other art styles. And then I saw the game Nyctophobia on a shelf, which is a Pandasaurus title. It's designed to be played with one person blindfolded. So it's a really cool hook by Catherine. I can't remember her surname. oh man. Anyway, she's very lovely, and this was her first published design. People really like the game, but I saw that box on a shelf, and I was immediately like, "Oh, I see why people think Dracula's Feast is cheap. Not because like the box itself is fine; it's entirely black and white. It's that same kind of ink style, but when it's surrounded by full color boxes, it it feels cheap. Like there's no other real word for it. It's not. It's a gorgeous style, but on the shelf it feels cheap. So we redid Dracula's Feast as Dracula's Feast New Blood, and we got a different artist, and we just went with a more kind of board gamey style. And so we had two types of comments. We had people being like, "Ah, man, I miss the old style. I wish you'd stuck with that." And we got people being like, "Oh, good, a game I can actually like put on my shelf." So I just thought that like your note about color is really interesting in that like there are games that can utilize like a rich black. I think Seventh Continent does a really good job of it.
But usually the ones that are not colorful are very striking, right? Those are ones where it's like black and white to really emphasize that.
Yeah, I think Seventh Continent is black and gold. This is from memory, so I could be completely wrong. But like, it's all black with one color on it. Control, which is the first Keymaster game, that's similar. It's like all black with like beautifully graphic designed gold on it. But yeah, it's a thing that I had a relevant anecdote that I wanted to share. Why am I justifying this? I'm talking on the podcast that I co-host, AJ. It has to be okay, or we don't have a show. Clear.
All right. So, can you even read that? Because that's what people see on the shelf.
Drunken Rumblegun.
I think it's Dragon Rampage, but I don't remember.
Yeah, Dragon Rampage.
Yeah, so for listeners, it's like one of those really elaborate text styles, and then it's a gradient almost, color. Yeah. So it's so hard to read. Just a really awful title.
It's like the Rural Juror.
Yeah. This one's even worse. Look how uncontrasted the title is here.
I can see it as Winds of Fortune, but you gotta work at it.
Yeah. And again, people walking past this, they see this right next to ones that actually have really crystal clear things. Like those are going to pop out and explode. And these are the things that their eyes are just going to glaze right past easily. Now this one has Hope. The problem with this one is less so the silver against a dark blue background. It's got fine contrast, but the whole front cover of it is foil, so you can't quite see it in the picture as easily. But it's really reflective, and it makes it really hard to read. And it looking at or seeing a foil game on the shelf doesn't make you go, "Oh wow, cool, a foil game." It makes you go, "Oh, that hurts my eyes to look at. I'm going to move on to the next one," because it's blinding.
How do you feel about lenticular covers?
I have no. I think it would need to be the right one. I think it could be fine. I think
I got a game I pitched to you as a co-design, and you were like, "No, I don't want to make this," and so it never got made. But it's called The Mad Woman of Bogsley Hollow. But the mad was going to be lenticular. Lenticular is that thing where it says different words from different angles. It was a big thing on like kids' toys in the 90s.
I think
so. It's either the Mad Woman of Bogsley Hollow, or from another angle, the Wise Woman of Bogsley Hollow, because the whole game is like, is she just a mad raving thing, or does she actually have psychic powers and can tell the future?
I think that could totally work as long as the title, font, and everything follow all the rest of the principles. Like, if it's still really striking, if it's still doing all this, that's fine. I do find with lenticular titles, lenticular, I shouldn't say titles specifically, but lenticular pictures, because of all like the lines on it, it actually does look a little bit muddy from most angles. Right. So I think if you were
that's what Hope made me think of there. Yeah. Hope also has this like accent thing at the side that looks like it's a cut off S. So I read that as Shopes.
Yeah, for sure. And I honestly think Fortune and Glory, my other example here, isn't as bad as probably I made it out to be. I think it's just like the white and the red from the fire is doing a good job of showing the background, but the edges of it are dark and blurry. And mostly it's just like such a long title with a lot of small words. I think that's the issue with that one. It's
called Fortune and Glory Rise of the Crimson Hand expansion. I was wondering if you pulled this one up because of the photos, because I know that's a controversial topic in board games.
What do you mean the photos? Oh, I see. Pictures of people instead of art. No, I mean, don't do it. People just don't like it. Simple as that.
It's not controversial. Just don't do it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's in French.
This is the back of Hope, and this is a better example of how impossible it is to read
Yeah.
things with this. And
It doesn't help that they have what's that, 7 paragraphs in tiny, tiny text?
yeah. Okay, so what stands out?
Ooh,
So
this is fun.
this is fun. So this is a little exercise for you. This is literally just a shelf of Board Game Bliss. I need to stock it, so
It's half empty,
game's
yeah.
empty. But it's a good exercise to see which games stand out and which ones blur into the background. So Peter, which games are just popping out to you?
Seven Wonders definitely caught my eye first.
Now
And then
that one, not the title specifically, but that it's a big, tall person. It's a very clear
right. The side of the art, I don't even know if it has a title, but it's just I guess it does at the very top. But it's like it's just very evocative. This statue on the side of the box.
Yeah.
The all white one caught my eye because I would immediately need to pick that up and see what it is. I'm not saying that makes it a good idea, but definitely that's the next one that caught my eye. And then not much after that. Those are the two that grabbed me.
So a big pick for
me.
Did
I pass?
those are fine callouts. I think Risk Legacy is a really good one. The red on the white is very striking to me. And in particular, I would say
Where is that?
Right beside the white one. That's why you didn't see it, because you were drawn to the one beside it. But like if you put Pandemic or if you put Risk Legacy beside most of the other ones, it would still pop off really well.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
But yeah, the big thing to look here is the contrast between the background and the actual title or the actual image that you're trying to see. The one that Peter called out, Seven Wonders, has a bright yellow and gold person holding
on a black background, like really clear contrast. One of the worst ones here, I'd say, is Splendor. Like, I happen to know what that game is, but I could not have told you from this picture.
Yeah, the worst one is Arcadia Quest, top left, because it's got so much busyness going on behind it. But yeah, think of the contrast that you have there, and if you just go to any game shelf, look at your own game shelf, right? Think of the ones that are popping out to you and how many of them blur in the background. So many games use grays and browns and then don't have super, super bright contrasting colors in them. And because of that, they just blur into the background. Like Consulting Detective is even white on black, but the text is so small and there's so much texture to it that it completely gets lost. Don't be fancy, don't be flashy, don't let your graphic designers do all sorts of cool things. Just have simple, crisp, clear words.
Or Santorini and XCOM are both really good here. Just super, super clear, super easy to read. Great contrast. Yep. For any publishers or self-publishers listening, here's what I strongly recommend. Go to ideally an independent bookstore and just look at the spines on the shelves, because you will see people, the independent books especially, like published books, yes, but independent books especially, will do anything they can to pop out. Whenever I visit a city, I try to visit the local bookstores. Like, I just like books, but just looking at those shelves, like I got to start taking more photos, because I'm always like, oh, that as a game would absolutely stand out would absolutely stand out the shelf in the best possible way. It's research without ripping off your own industry.
Yeah.
Because, if you did what Risk Legacy did, cool, but now you're just doing what someone else on that same shelf does. Whereas independent bookstores, it's very rare that an independent book has a matching tie-in board game.
Yeah. All right. Next one, the bland front cover. So this is Serbian Moose Sturbian, the initial campaigns on the Balkan front in World War I, 1914. And just like completely nothing on the background. Now this one, I really like this example here. I'm going to come back to this later, but this is my pick for, and it has a art that kind of all like blurs together a little bit, very similar colors and stuff.
It's all very browny, yeah.
Yeah. So this is my example of a bland front cover. Colorful. Seasons. I think Seasons is very colorful. It's got like the bright orange highlights that don't distract, I don't think, from the rest of the thing. It just the bright pop of orange sort of draws your attention to the rest of it. Now it is a bit messy, but it's a very good example of being colorful and getting people's attention. Striking. Saltlands. Look at that contrast, baby. Bright white with dark red browns for the characters and black title. Now the title's a little bit messy in terms of like it's got some like road marks or swirling sand or something that's making it a little unnecessary hard to read at the first level.
I think it gets away with it. I think
Yeah.
I think it pulls.
Yeah, and it immediately gives you like a Mad Max vibe, like Saltlands. That sounds kind of like it would be Mad Max. So you can see like some junker stuff there, and these people look like they'd be from there. It
And it's
immediately
still
just like,
using browns. It's all brown, and yet
yeah.
it absolutely pops.
Mhm. Clean. Cards Against Humanity. This is not just an arbitrary font that was chosen. They went really hard trying to find the perfect font for it. It doesn't have anything on the box except it says Cards Against Humanity, a party game for horrible people. That tagline there is funny and might get you to look at further if you haven't heard of it before. But just the crisp, clear confidence of just the title. Love that.
And especially in the party game market where they were, looks
Yeah.
nothing like anything else on the shelf.
Yeah.
Everything else is
Pitch
Saturday
black.
morning cartoony, just trying to like, hey. It's like when you see those like business card content, whatever it is, like you put a bunch of business cards out and your attention's immediately drawn to the clean one because everything else is so busy. Or if everything is clean, you're immediately drawn to the busy one. Like product design is not in a vacuum. It's in comparison to what's in the market. So I think this is one of the cleverest boxes for it specifically, not for accounting books.
Yeah. Clean. So this one is a very good example of showing exactly what it needs to and nothing more. This is Blood Rage.
Blood Rage, by the way. Yeah.
There's just like fiery explosion behind a Viking dude charging towards the picture. That is just such a simple, clean understanding of like, yes, there's going to be a battle. It's going to be awesome. Things are going to explode. Cool. Jaw dropping. So this is just, did you buy the top tier artist? Did you hire a Kwanchai Moria or one of those types of people? My example is Scythe. Scythe sold itself on the artwork. Like many people.
And Scythe came from the art. Jamie saw this art and was like, I want to make that game.
Great point. This game got made because the art was that good. Find an artist that good, and your game will sell a lot of copies just because of
Tang.
Unique. So, if you have a wacky box, people are going to take notice. Bananagrams comes in a banana pouch. 5-Minute Dungeon looks like an hourglass. Bears vs. Babies is furry. Laser Riders looks like the cassette or the VHS box, that kind of thing. Now, I want to be very, very careful here with what I say, because as a retailer, it is annoying dealing with weird boxes. You have to be very careful with how you do it. And if you have boxes that don't fit nicely in a carton, then you can't ship them easily. They might get damaged. They can't go with other games easily. And if you have something that's weird and wobbly, then it might not fit on the shelf. Like 5-Minute Dungeon isn't a stable game. Pandemic is actually even worse than that. Because it's so skinny, you can't have it upright on a couch shelf without falling over. Pandemic was like the game that fell over the most for me. And so if you have games that you want people to see the front cover, you have to make sure it's wide enough to support its weight without falling over. Otherwise, we can't. And then you lose a lot of eyeballs on it because you have to have it horizontally or something weird like that. And
so earlier I went and got some games off my shelf specifically for this kind of moment. So I want to jump to these now. As a retailer, cast your mind back. What do you think of these? I'll do it in this order. Number 1, describe what you're seeing.
Abandon All Artichokes. It is a semicircle, or it's a circle with like a flat bottom, and
it's meant to be an artichoke shape, kind of.
Yeah.
It's like an egg with the bottom cut off, I think, is probably the.
Yeah. So the way to think about whether or not it's good is sort of 2 things. I think 3 things. Thing number 1: how does it ship? If it is a square or rectangle, then it will ship well. If it is close to a square or a rectangle, it will still ship well. You can have a rectangular carton of that box, and yeah, you're wasting a little bit of space in it on the 2 edges, but that's going to ship just fine. It's not going to cause you any problems. And what happens often is the retail store is going to purchase in bulk from distributors. Distributors are going to mix and match from different boxes. So most of the time you're not buying a full carton of a game, you'll buy a couple copies of it because there's so many games coming out. You want to have a little bit of everything instead of a ton of everything or very little variety. So if the distributor has to open up a box and then add in a couple copies of Abandoned Artichokes or whatever game into a bigger box full of the stuff that the retail store wants to buy. How does that fit in with the rest of it? Abandoned Artichokes would be fine there. You could still lay it horizontally and stack stuff on top of it. It'd be totally fine. Step 2 is, does it fit on my retail shelves? And that one would. It has a flat bottom. So if it was a circular tin, it would be awful because it would have to lie horizontally. You would never see the front of the thing. And that's the problem with the really skinny boxes like Pandemic, like I was saying. Because it has that flat bottom, it can sit upright and people can see it more easily. That's great. And the third thing is just the shape for shelf presence, which is what we were just talking about it being. So I'd say Abandon All Artichokes gets 2 thumbs up.
This one's a little unfair because this is explicitly not made for retail, but...
Oh, is that a wallet game? Yeah, wallet
it
game.
is.
Yeah, so that's interesting because
it's cheating a little bit. I'm fully acknowledging that.
Yeah. So they come in clamshells, not just like that, when, at least at my store. And I think that they're not in retail, broadly speaking. My store had a really good selection, so we ordered from them directly, not from regular distribution. Maybe that's changed. Again, my information is at this point
almost
5 years old, whatever. But if it comes in a clamshell, it doesn't work well. Yes, if I have hooks, so just to describe it a little bit, you would hang on the wall these straight hooks that go long and then have like a loop at the end so they're not pointy. You've probably seen them. If you ever see booster packs of Magic cards, that's the most common thing that you'll see is them hung up like that in mass market stores or behind the counter at game stores. That space is at an all-time premium and it's usually used for Magic cards. If you don't have, if you're not selling Magic cards, then oftentimes you will use those for small games or whatever, but a lot of game stores don't even have those. If they don't sell Magic cards, they won't have those at all. They don't bother doing that, which means it's in the clamshell, it's sitting flat, which means it's a bad product because it's hard for people to see. If the wallet came, you know how I would do it is I would have, if you insist on having the clamshell, I would have a stand on the back of it, or I would do something like that where it can sit like semi-vertically, or just have the wallet as a product be able to unfold, like shrink wrap it such a way that you can like unfold the half of it and then have it stand like that. And I think that would do quite well. Or even the trick is you want it to be small for the shipping and big for the store shelf in terms of what
That's
people can see, but not
That's
big in terms of but also not big in terms of taking too much shelf space because each retailer only has so much shelf space. And if they're like, well, this game is huge and isn't from a known publisher or something like that, then I don't want to waste the shelf space on it. Because if your game takes up the space of 10 other games, they could just put 10 other games on the shelf.
Right.
So it's tricky, but I would say the wallet games were a poor product that were harder to sell. And
they weren't meant to be for retail. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, my last one.
Oh, Don't Skip Leg Day by friend of the show, Alex Cutler, who you will have known from the previous episode because, of course, you listen to all our episodes. And it looks like a protein shake, which is sick as heck.
Retailer thoughts?
Yeah, so that one, the annoying thing is the repacking there. You can fit those into a carton, you just stand them vertically, and then you have a rectangular box that can hold a bunch of them. When they're being repacked, it's a pain, and that's going to annoy a lot of retailers. But because it's plastic, not cardboard, that's a huge difference. And cardboard boxes,
it won't pierce.
Yeah, and it won't get dented or dinged. Dents and dings are so annoying for board game publishers because if it gets a dent or ding, so many people are like, I would never buy that. Why would I want to buy a brand new board game with a tiny little...
I think it's Quacks of Quedlinburg. I bought a dinged copy because it was like $30 cheaper. And every time I pull that game out, I'm like, I kind of just want to get a new copy. Like, it's so stupid. But every single time I play that game, I'm like, I wish I didn't have a damaged one.
Mm-hmm. So that's the huge problem. Because it comes in something that's not going to get dented or dinged, it's just plastic. It gets a pass from me for the shipping, and on a retail shelf is going to get so much attention 2 big thumbs up from me.
Cool. Okay, carry on. That was my show and tell.
Excellent. All right, so this is energy/moment design. So remember, Eric Lang talked about having a really cool moment happen in your game that captures people's attention. This is the same sort of principle applied to front covers. And this is something that Netflix does as well with their thumbnails and stuff. You'll notice that there's very few thumbnails that are just like, here's everything you'll see in the entire show. Here's Walter White and his lawyer and his, and his lawyer's bodyguard. And there's guns and there's drugs and that's so much stuff. It's hard to parse and your brain's gonna ignore it. But when you have a concise, specific moment that you're trying to get across, or a specific character, or a specific one thing, that's when it gets people's attention. So this is a really interesting example because this is Star Wars, the card game, Eric Lang, designer of it, and it has just like a bunch of the heroes, a bunch of the villains, and a bunch of people fighting on the Death Star, and the TIE fighters, and the Star Destroyer. It's like, it has everything. And granted, this is a CCG or LCG, so it's got a very different audience. It's fine to have all that stuff on there. But if you want to make organic sales, this is not the way to do it. A much better example is Star Wars Imperial Assault. And for this talk, I even did an experiment. I put them both side by side for a week and just saw who picked up both of those copies. And nobody picked up Star Wars the card game. Everyone,
really?
I shouldn't say everyone.
Yeah,
multiple people picked up Imperial Assault. And Imperial Assault, the front cover, it still has a lot of stuff going on. It's actually not the best example in the world, but it's so much more visceral. It has so much more energy to it. Yeah, it's not just a cardboard cutout of Han holding a gun. You see who the scoundrel is shooting. You see Darth Vader in the picture imposing over these Jedi who are trying to hold back.
It's using a lot of classic composition tricks of like depth and lines of action and rule of third. Like it's doing art instead of doing product. Doing art instead of doing product is the wrong term because we're talking about product design, but you know what I mean. Like it's following the rules of art rather than the rules of put everything there.
Mm-hmm. And one trap I think a lot of board games fall into is because movies are about characters and games are necessarily about gameplay. I think oftentimes there's less emphasis put on the front cover of individual people, but individual people are something that we can connect with and something that I think is a lot more appealing to someone than like a castle on a hill with no one there. Show me like the person.
Who's the Agricola artist?
He's
done so. Do you know who I'm talking about? He did Agricola and Feast for Odin and Le Havre, and he did stuff that was very Rosenberg. You know the art. Okay, so that guy, if you go through his covers, he'll almost always have a person front and center, and then the landscape. And I think he does his art is divisive, but I think he does a really good example of what you're talking about of being like character setting.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason people have kept coming back to him for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm. Now on to layered. So this is where I talk about the bigger information is bigger, the less important information is smaller. And this one's a good example because it literally layers it line by line. So on Exploding Kittens, you have the nice big poppy title, Exploding is Exploding, but it's still legible. It's still clear to see, even though it's not as clear as the bright white kittens beside it. Then you see a kitten chewing on a hand grenade. So it's just great in all ways. But what we're talking
about, pull the pin out with its teeth without realizing what it's doing.
Yeah, just playing with it. And it has the most backed Kickstarter ever award on there, right? That's something that people understand. It means more than a Dice Tower award because they're like, oh, I know Kickstarter, the most backed ever. Wow. And it gets away with the ages and player count and stuff being a bit big because it makes it symmetrical with the award that's on there, even though it's a little bit bigger than I would have liked otherwise. But it also has 2 minutes to learn, 15 minutes to play. Huge selling point right there. Yeah. Like saying it's so easy, so fast. That's great. And it says how ages 7+, easy to learn, 2 to 5 players. The reason why it has this extra information that normally I think is a downside that you wouldn't want to have all this stuff on the front cover and you'd want to be even cleaner than it is because each of these lines is selling points. Ages less so. I would have actually reversed it. I would have had 2 minutes to learn, 15 minutes to play, as people would be like, whoa, Tell me more, and then get to the boring stuff. But I think the other layering, and on that section you see it go top to bottom. So again, put the most important thing first. In the middle of it, it says a card game in big words. Okay, cool. I get it. Card game for people who are into kins and explosions and laser beams and sometimes goats. And each of these gets smaller and smaller and smaller because it's trying to lead you into the most important information and go smaller and smaller. This isn't something you should always do. I just thought it was a great example of
it's also
how you layer in.
It's comedic timing in visual form.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's for people who are into kittens and explosions and laser beams and sometimes goats. Like it's just a funny line, and they've captured that delivery, but through use of text size.
Yeah. Incredible cover. And look at that. So then I go into the layers. So layer 1 is the title and the kitten. That's the first thing you see. That gets your attention. Step 1 to people picking up the box. The first step towards people actually buying a game. Then we have the information directly below it. Your eye line is guided down, and then the 2 things on the side. So
I'm going to interrupt. How familiar are you with this box?
I mean, a little. He's holding up That Time You Killed Me for the audience.
So, what's your gut impression of looking at this? I'm looking at the back of the box.
I'm having a hard time seeing the back of the box because you're really small in my window and it's blurry. Do you want me to Google it really quick?
Just turn off your screen for a second. Like, turn off screen sharing just for a second.
It's still just too pixelated.
Blurry. I gotcha. Yeah, just Google back of the box. Because this breaks some rules, but I think I'm going to be biased towards my game, obviously, but also did very well. It breaks some rules, but in a very deliberate and successful way. Successful as in we did well with this. Like the back of the box, I think is a real selling point.
I'm just trying to pull up a big image for everybody to see.
Cool. Before I start jumping into it, I do want to get your gut thoughts.
Okay, let me just. I can't be asked to bring it for everybody. You already held it up. They can see it.
Yeah, I was going to say it.
Right.
Is it too blurry for you to see anything?
I'm not looking at that. Okay, so first things first. Layering is great. That Time You Killed Me is like, I get this is the back of the box. You don't need to like tell me the title again, but I can see all the components laid out really easily. You're getting across the fact that there's like scenarios in the game right under there. And I think it's a good use of some of the space just like popping out and looking very visually appealing. And then it says, I am excited to announce that I have invented a time machine. Can you read me the text underneath that?
The gut I was going to get is like, this is lots of very small text, which I think we would normally say is a no-no. Mm-hmm. It also has a quote, which you'd normally expect to be a reviewer, but like you said, it says, I'm excited to announce I've invented a time machine. And then it's credited to you several decades from now.
Right. Yeah, so that's...
I'm going to read the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
I want to read the text because I think it's funny, but I think basically Pandasaurus reached out and were like, hey, we need text for the back of the box, and I wrote this, and they were like, we were not expecting this, but like we ran with it. Do you know the series, A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket?
I do.
Similar thing happened there. He was asked to write a blurb for the back, and he really struggled with it, so he eventually wrote reasons not to read this book, and they ran with it, and that obviously became a very successful series. But like it's sort of the what not to do. Like at no point do we describe. I'll read it, and you'll know it. You'll understand. I have good news and bad news. The good news: you've invented time travel. The bad news: someone is going to murder you and steal your invention. The worst news: that person is someone you know. In fact, it's the person you're going to play this game with. The worst news of all: you might not be the person who invented time travel. You might be the murderer. So how do you know if you're the smartest person of all time or the traitor who killed them? Well, there's only one way to find out. Two, if you include just wait a few decades and see which end of the murder you end up on. Inside this box is a game that simulates time travel so accurately that only a true genius, the person who invented the time machine, can master it. You'll need to position yourself perfectly over 3 boards, past, present, future, and travel back and forth through time in an intricate game of abstract strategy. Buy this game, take it home, play through the campaign, defeat your enemy. Prove once and for all that you're not the treacherous monster who murdered their best friend for fame and glory. No, that's the person sitting opposite you. Hopefully that doesn't make things awkward.
I think the last paragraph could have been trimmed down, but this is very unfair because you're a good professional writer. So yes, that is a very, very fun text blurb to read, and um, I think it gives you to your point of it not saying like exactly what the deal is with the game. I think it gives you enough context just by saying it's an abstract strategy. Like that's a gamery term, but it's so commonly that's like the most common genre known to other people because
Right.
chess and checkers are abstract strategies and those are very popular. And they can literally see it looks like a chess or checkers board. It's a square grid that makes them think of
Right.
chess or checkers, and you literally have white and black. Those are the same colors that you have in chess, and it's a chess-like game. So I think that does a good job of conveying it. Would I like to see a bit less text? Sure, but is the text earning its keep? I think so. I think again the last paragraph could have had a few sentences removed, but it definitely gives you the vibe of this is a abstract strategy that is going to be quirky and fun and funny.
Right. It's a show don't tell, not by showing you game mechanisms, but by showing you tone, which is
Yes.
Exploding Kittens. You can see why that made me think of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a fun one. This
you got to share your screen again.
Yep. So this is doing a little bit of homework here. So is this cover successful? Is the question. Is it colorful? Is it striking? Is it clean? Is it jaw-dropping? Is it unique? Is it layered? So let's
Who is it
take
targeting? This is the Serbian Mus Strespin that from the start with a very grey palette.
Serbian Mus Serbian, the initial campaigns on the Balkan front in World War I. Give it its due.
In the Elysian Quadrant.
So Peter, is it colorful?
No.
Is it striking?
No. I mean, it's striking, but not in a good way.
Is it clean?
Not really, which is weird because it's also like it's kind of busy for not having much going on.
Is it jaw-dropping?
No.
Is it unique?
I couldn't say. I haven't seen. I think all GMT games kind of look like this, but that can also be a branding decision, like within a company.
Is it layered?
I would say I would argue like 50% on this one because the art does have like perspective and lines of action, and there is the image and then the not image. Like it's layered in that sense.
I'm going to add one more question that I think I should have had, which is related to the very last thing we just talked about. How is the moment/energy? Does it have energy? Is it a clear moment?
I assume this is a war game based on everything about it except the images of like just people wandering, like horses and people, soldiers just walking through like a bunch of people. Like they're not in a battle. There's no combat. They're just having a stroll. I would not have consciously noticed that without your statement.
But then
it's pageantry, but the game is, I assume, not pageantry, right?
Yeah. So the most important question, though, is who is this targeting?
Wargamers. 100,000% wargamers. My uncle.
This is so. If you just go off my principles, you would probably say this is not a good front cover. But this is laser specific targeting to a particular audience. The old grognard 80-year-old war gamers who are moving around their chits and counters, they don't want a bright, colorful, striking thing. This is exactly in line with their expectations of what this game is. It is a dry historical simulation game, and it looks like a dry historical simulation game.
It delivers.
So if you are targeting a hardcore audience, a specific niche audience, you need to target them in whatever form that looks like, as opposed to blindly just following every principle that I have. But
the other, there's 1,000 million Cards Against Humanity ripoffs, and they also rip off the product design. So you can tell at a glance of the box, oh, this is a Cards Against Humanity ripoff, which tells me I don't want to buy it, but I'm not the target audience. For that target audience, they're like, oh, great, crabs against humidity? Cool, I know what this is.
What do you mean? It follows the exact same thing as Cards Against Humanity because it wants people to see that and think, oh, this is similar to that. So again, this is just saying don't blindly follow these things. Think about who you're targeting. But if you are trying to target random buyers off the, casual gamers who go into a hobby store, mass market people who pick it up off the shelf, aka 95+% of the people who are going to be buying your games, you do need to follow these principles. Just
there is a very, we've talked about it before, the obvious example of someone who made a war game but gave it a different box, and so it had massive crossover appeal. Who am I thinking of?
A war game that has massive crossover appeal? I assume you're talking about Root.
Yes, because they made them cute little animals, and it's not a chits game at all. But like, it's not a chits game, but it's not a chits game.
Yeah, well, it's basically just one of the coin games, which are right. The same thing but not cute. You can apply the principles and turn a game into a crossover hit. Obviously, there's a lot more going on with Root. It didn't become a crossover hit because of that one thing, but applying the principles could still help any game. Yeah. So going back to laser-specific targeting, Peter, can you describe what you're seeing on screen?
So it says food truck champion in big letters, very nicely highlighted with white outline. There's a truck racing past the words food truck. And there's an illustration of a bunch of people at a food truck and some people at a second food truck. Queue of audience. So there's 5 food trucks.
You're going into a lot of detail here, so it's going a little more general. If you saw this game on the shelf, this is the front cover, who do you think this game is for?
My girlfriend, who likes food games. the charcuterie audience, broadly speaking.
Yeah, so it's what would you guess the weight of it is?
Oh, I was about to say charcuterie weight. That's not helpful. Light.
Yeah, so this game is Glory to Rome. I'm not kidding.
Really?
It is it is Glory to Rome. Look at for audiences. I've got literal Glory to Rome beside Food Truck Champion. They are virtually identical. There are a few changes made. I don't want to I want to dismiss the designer too much. Yeah. There are a few changes made. I think for the worse, but. For the,
but I don't want to badmouth the designer, but their game sucks.
I mean, I don't like any games, so. But you're literally splaying out the cards from the same player mat. You've got like the 4 actions from the different card types. Your multi-use cards. Like it is Glory to Rome. It is a super hardcore strategy game, very very thinky, and it is marketing itself as though it was like a kids game or a family game. You need to be very.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to Root again because. Root also to an extent does this. It looks like a cutesy little card game, and then like you said, it's a coin war game, which is pretty intense and hardcore and impossible to teach. And it obviously did very, very well, but the biggest bit of backlash is definitely like, I bought this and it was not for me at all. Root gets away with it by being one of the best games ever designed. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, classic us. There are going to be exceptions to the rule, but I would argue that it's more like Root. I don't want to say Root succeeded in spite of it, but I think like the value of the cutesiness was someone who likes this type of heavy game can introduce it to people who don't normally like that kind of game because of the cute vibes. And I think if that's sort of the approach that you're going for, the back of the box needs to be crystal clear as to what type of game this actually is. So after someone takes that first step, looks at it, flips it over, they understand what they're getting into.
Yeah.
All right, so this is one that's near and dear to my heart. Thumbnail. So, games aren't just sold in store. They also sell online. My friendly little game store also sold games online. Now, I'm not going to say I am a genius marketer of the online space because I don't have nearly as much experience with that as I do with in-store. But I can tell you that the thumbnail of the game matters. And a simple exercise you can do to determine whether or not your box is a good thumbnail is put it 20 feet away from you, get it to the point where
shrink it down on your screen.
Yeah, zoom out in your screen, make it 2 inches on your screen or something like that. And then you'll see how good it looks. So I've got some examples here. Do you have something to say before we go into examples?
No, go ahead.
So Peter,
I was going to make a sex joke, and I was like, not the time, Peter.
So Peter, can you describe the 4 games that you see here that we just talked about?
So we got Cards Against Humanity, which is just the black box with white writing. Seasons, which is the beautiful, colorful fantasy scene. Saltlands, which is the one that has a white background and then very brown but very stark, contrasted characters. And then Blood Rage, which was the Viking running towards the camera.
Yeah. And so I think looking at these through this lens shows you that even if they excel at some of the principles, they can fail in the others.
Right. Seasons especially, I think, here.
Yes, Seasons is punished the most. Like, Seasons is something that if you're in the store walking by it, you're like, wow, this is gorgeous, and people will pick it up. But people are not likely to be scrolling past a million games and stop on Seasons and go, oh, wow, that one looks great. Because it's just so busy and there's so many different colors, and it's not striking enough, it doesn't pop.
Two things about Seasons. One is that the title is crystal clear in thumbnail form, which is really impressive.
Yes.
And the second is that it does this kind of orange border thing, which in the big version, I was like, I don't know what they're doing here. But now I've seen it shrunk down. I'm like, oh, that's actually carrying its weight, not for the full size, but to give the shrunken version some shape. It's still too busy, but at least like it's not just a blur of blue and green. Mm-hmm. It's got an outline. It's got some character to it, which I really like.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing to be aware of is these thumbnails are always square. So if you have, say, a really skinny or a really skinny from either dimension,
portrait or landscape, yeah,
it's not going to look good as a thumbnail because you're effectively wasting half of the space of the thumbnail. If you have a square box or a mostly rectangular box, it's going to fit in nicely. But something like Onitama or those types of ones that are fairly skinny boxes, those don't do as well on thumbnails. Is it a deal breaker? No, just something to be aware of that you have to extra pop from that.
Cards Against Humanity is interesting because they're literally just not using the bottom half of the rectangle. So if you needed to crop that to a square, you literally lose nothing.
Yes. And that one's a good example too, because it pops so hard that it doesn't matter if you're using all the space, because whatever the background is of the store, it doesn't matter. It's giving itself a pitch black background with a bright white front cover.
It's funny how much we're complimenting what is arguably the most bland box of all time, but it's not unthinkingly bland. It's very specific and deliberately crafted.
Absolutely. And then
it's like complimenting a game for its sheer elegance. It doesn't mean like they didn't bother to design it. I mean, they did such an extraordinary job of designing it that there's almost nothing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Blood Rage, I think that's a really good example of how clear it was when you looked at the larger version of it. It's just dude running towards you with a fire in the background. But because the whole thing is such similar colors, it becomes very like muddied and blurry when you shrink it down, and it works way less effectively than it did physically.
I will say that they've used some, again, like there's a line of action, literally just like some lines that give it some separation. Like it's not just an orange blur. It's a very distinctive circle in the middle with some lightning striking that circle. And they could have gone a little bit further with lines of action. Seasons, meanwhile, has no lines of action. Like it sort of has everything meeting in that, like right below the title where the staff is being held. But with like a little bit more contrast, they could have made that into a really distinctive, cool thumbnail shape.
Yeah, I think if you make
I'm an art director, so I obsess about this kind of thing.
So if the person was a bit darker relative to the other ones, and then the lava flows were like a brighter red or a brighter red/white, and the lava bursts were going sort of diagonals, leading
right. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, if the lava, basically you want all the lines to be pointing at the one thing, which in this case would be the shield in the middle. And they've partially done that, but then they sort of haven't. It's a very successful game. It's a very beautiful piece of art. I'm not trying to tear down something as being a failure, but I agree.
I think a lot of these types of comments, I just in general on this podcast, is we can talk about a very successful game and critique an element of it, because even though it was successful, sometimes it's successful in spite of a minor defect or a minor area that could have been improved. Whether it's the box size, or whether it's the front cover, whether it's the title, something, it could have been even more of a success potentially if it followed some of these principles, I think.
Agreed.
Back of the box. Do you want to read this one out? You don't need?
Game in progress. Components. Playtime/play account/age. Steps of play.
So turns out I did go into this more. I think Pandemic was my bad box example because I always fell over, and then I go into the good stuff on it here. So yes, like we said, it has the steps, it has the important information that you need to have, but it doesn't, the components and everything don't get in the way of the rest of the box, and it shows the game in progress, which is something I don't think we explicitly mentioned, but we basically went over. So we'll just skip ahead here.
Is my screen too blurry for this to be even visible?
Yeah, for me it is. Yeah, I'm sure everyone can see it fine.
So it's the box front of Critter Kitchen, which is also behind me on a shelf somewhere. And Sandara's done this really clever thing where it's a busy cityscape. Like there's a lot of stuff happening. Actually, just pop back to Blood Rage for a second, like the thumbnails page.
Yep.
So much like the Blood Rage thing, there is a person in the center and then a lot of stuff happening behind them. But what she's done is she's put the person in the center. So like there's buildings on either side, but then they sort of, I want to say like end. So it's just like a white background, not literally a white background, but essentially a very, very light background behind the central characters, which means in thumbnail form, you can clearly see their outline. Like even on my phone, this is teeny tiny, but I can immediately see the boar in the middle. I can't necessarily see all three of the chefs, but I can see the boar really clearly because it's a character against a white background, despite being in the middle of a busy city scene. if they did something here, so imagine if like there was a lightning bolt behind this character. I think this is sort of what you're saying. Like if that jet of red, like that very light red, if that had been directly behind the character coming up, then they would have been perfectly silhouetted.
Yeah, I think
That's all.
I see exactly why you brought this up. This is almost exactly what we were talking about with Blood Rage. The white buildings and background are a literal V pointing towards a main character to emphasize.
Oh, you've pulled it up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
all the lines are like the lines of action is a thing I think about all the time. Is direct, like all the characters are looking at them even. Mm-hmm. Like there's no doubt what the center, literal center, but also the focus of the image is. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the parts that aren't the V are all darkened slightly. It's subtle, yes, but it's all right there.
It's very effective, yeah.
Yeah. My only note might have been to only have one character there in the middle instead of the two, the boar and the snake person. Just to
there's a boar, lizard, and a mouse, which is hard to tell in the thumbnail version. But that is the core of the game, so like it's a tricky one.
Because it's like a worker placement where you have 3 people or something like
that. You have exactly 3 workers, and it's those 3 characters. So yeah, I think it made sense to do what they did, but I'm also curse acknowledging it. So
I think what I would have done is take the right dark diagonal, push it back a little bit, elongate the bridge, and have the bridge more clearly emphasizing
1, 2, 3
all 3 of those. Yeah, and
that's what I was thinking too.
But it's very good. Like that's
yeah.
Again,
it's going to sell some copies.
Yeah. All right. So back of the box, we already talked about. This is just me emphasizing it. Perceived value. This is something that I think about a lot, and I think this might be the thing that designers and maybe even publishers think about the least. Probably not publishers, but
I was going to say publishers in the modern day anyway are very conscious of this.
Yeah. So perceived value, there's a lot of ways that you can I'm sure I have the whole step.
Size, weight, component quality, length of play, flexibility. I think even when you made this, but probably twice as much, component quality has become the most relevant factor. And this is what I was talking about in the last episode about like cutting components is not necessarily a good idea because people want those like fancy, nice components. In the Kickstarter world, anyway.
I only partially. So I
make your points, and then we'll see if we disagree.
we probably don't. But my point basically comes down to all games' bar of quality has been raised, so it's less of a selling point and more of a way to get your foot in the door. Like if you have bad component quality, people will be like, "Oh, really? Like, this box is." So these cards aren't as nice. Yeah, go ahead.
We're coming at it from different angles. You're thinking of publishers. I'm thinking of designers pitching to publishers.
Right. Okay.
Component quality has become so key, like you said, that as a designer, we need to be thinking about this.
Cool. All right.
In a way that maybe we didn't 10 years ago.
So how do customers perceive value? It's a very difficult question for someone to ask. Is this game worth $60? What human brains do is not actually try and calculate how much is this game going to be worth $60 of fun to me. What we do is we substitute other questions in their place. Common psychological phenomenon. It happens in every way for when you have a difficult decision to make, or an amorphous, ethereal sort of question to have. So instead, what do we substitute for board games? Immediately, you see the size of the game. The bigger the box, the more perceived value it has. The heavier the game is, the more perceived value it has.
As in physically heavier.
Yes, the weight of the game, the physical weight.
Weight of the game has two different meanings, so I just wanted to really make sure we were talking about literal, on a scales weight.
Yes. Component quality, like Peter mentioned, this can be everything from cardstock to minis to those cute squishy berries in every little...
Bakelite tiles, what are they called now? The Azul tiles?
I don't know the name for them, but yeah, the clicky-clacky tiles. That's what I was
calling. Clicky-clacky tiles. I have Cracks and Quedlingberg with a busted box, but with all the BGG clicky-clacky upgrades. And when I show it to someone, they're like, I'm going to go online and buy it right now. I'm like, okay, whatever price you see, to get the clicky-clackies, you need to pay twice that much again. And the game is so good that they do, but it goes from being a $40 purchase to a $120 purchase because you need those clicky-clackies. They're gorgeous.
This is a physical medium. The physical components matter. Length of play. So this one is much less important than the other ones. Much less important. But
interesting.
It does matter. If you have a 15-minute game and you try charging someone $50 for it, they're gonna have a mismatch in terms of their expectation, and they're going to be much less interested in the game. It's this one's a little bit more tenuous, but again, if you think about just like the experience of like pulling out a big, expensive game, people expect to have a bigger play experience.
An interesting, I'm going to talk about an all-play thing again. Their game, River Valley Glassworks, I don't know if you saw that one. It did pretty well. It did very well on Kickstarter. That is a $40 15-minute game, which is such a weird... Like, they get away with it, but that's such a mismatch from what we're used to that I'm kind of impressed that it's sort of a testament to how good they are at product that they made that work.
I'm just...
You're fact-checking me?
Yeah, I want to see what my Canadian price is for the standard edition. Yep. Peter, dead on. Wild. So then flexibility. So this
you know why I know the price? Because they only have 2 price points.
True. So flexibility. How easy is it to get to the table? If someone looks at a game and like, wow, that game looks awesome, but it's really hard to get to the table, they might not buy it. Now, this isn't maybe perceived value, but it does factor into whether or not they're going to make the purchase, right?
This is actually pulling directly against what you were saying earlier of like, if you can make a game that is amazing but only plays 3, that increases the chance that it'll be recommended for 3 players, but also really cuts down the flexibility part of the perceived value. CGE made a game, Deal with the Devil, which is 4 players only. You have to have 4 players. I love CGE. They're probably my favorite company, favorite board game company outside of maybe Leader Games. But I'm not going to buy that. Like, it's so rare for me to have, I have enough games that play flexibly that I'm not going to buy a 4-player only game.
Yeah, if it's 4 players
Witness
only,
was another 4-player only one.
It's not, you have to think of it, it's compounding factors. It's not just 4 people. It's 4 people who want to play this specific type of game. And then you have to talk them into it when they could play anything else.
Yeah. Witness is another 4-player only game that I'm much more likely to buy because that game is for anyone in a way that Deal with the Devil is not.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, flexibility, there's other factors as well, but basically flexibility just means how likely am I to get to the table if I buy this?
Yeah.
So like Seafault has the worst flexibility of almost any game ever. It's a legacy game. So you're committing to playing it a bunch of times. Yeah. It's a Euro economic game that also has like story elements and choosing an adventure. And I'm sure I had more cogent points back then, but
I was so excited for this game.
So for perceived value, component quality, minis, they used to add a ton of perceived value. Now less so because so many games have them, but it's still a big driver.
Still up there, yeah.
Having
Cool Meaning or Not, who do Blood Rage, like they sort of made they entered the market by saying like, hey, we're going to do minis well. And people were like, you can do minis well? And sort of open the door to, like you said, there's a glut of minis these days. But if you've got cool, distinct, unique minis, I think it is still definitely a selling point.
Mm-hmm. So this is interesting. These tokens are from Battle for Rokugan, which is a troops on a map game that was relatively inexpensive, but had the cardboard tokens. But by relatively expensive, at the time, I think Battle for Rokugan was like 45 CAD, and I think Canadian dollars, and I think Blood
I thought it was
Rage
45 CAD.
I think Blood Rage was like 75 or something like that. So one was about double the price of the other. But people would look at Blood Rage and think, wow, what value? I've got all these minis. And they look at Battle for Rokugan and be like, wow, that's expensive. It just comes with a cardboard. There's nothing they could see that would justify half the price of Blood Rage. Interesting example. I don't know why this one's in here. I'm sorry, guys. This is...
oh, there we go. It'll explain it on the next slide.
Perfect. Good or bad pitch? Do you want to read this out?
Cave Paintings is a drawing game in which you don't have to draw well to win. The game includes team rules for playing with more than 7 players, as well as an advanced variant. Should you be more Cro-Magnon than Neanderthal?
So this is what it says. Yeah, so this is what it says on BGG for it. This is like the publisher trying to sell it to you. And I think this says it on the back of the box as well. So I want to break this down and talk about whether or not this was a good or bad pitch from the just the text.
Perceived value? Or
No, we're on from perceived value. We're on to the next form of pitching.
Oh, right. The description, yeah.
Remember last episode when you were like, let's just finish off boxes?
Yeah, that was a whole week ago. I can't remember that.
All right, so Cave Drawings is a drawing game. Good. We know it's about drawing. That's important to know. That a lot of people are going to immediately be like, that's for me. A lot of people are going to be like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
Good communication. In which you don't have to draw well to win. Whoa, that's really good to know, because now this increases my flexibility, right? I can play this with people who can't draw well. If I am, and it tells you that it's going to be like a lighter party sort of a game. So cool, good to know. Gold star.
It's also a point of difference from, like, it's a USP.
Yeah. And then what's all this garbage? The game includes team rules for playing with more than 7 people. Like, what are you talking about?
This was my experience with some of your sell sheets, where I was like, why are you clarifying a thing you haven't told me? Like,
yeah.
Hi, totally my name's Peter. It's okay, my aunt's moving back to Bismal. You're like, what?
So this, don't worry, I didn't even read this in my presentation before. This is just showing you how much information is out there. So this is a good or bad pitch for Gloomhaven. And then I just skip ahead. So if you're looking at the screen, you can see which parts of that I think are actually relevant. I think I switched colors here. So the green parts is the stuff that's like actually useful. Do you want to just read the green parts to people?
Gloomhaven is a game of Euro-inspired tactical combat in a persistent world of shifting motives. And then next bullet point, the green part is, this is a game with a persistent and changing world. In the actual thing, it's not back-to-back persistent like that, but just the way I'm reading it happens to be. That is ideally played over many game sessions. After a scenario, players will make decisions on what to do, which will determine how the story continues. Kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure book.
So the green here is, I think, the real selling points from this. It's a Euro tactical combat. Like, that tells you a lot. And this is targeting hardcore gamers, so it can use that type of advanced terminology. This wasn't trying to get into mass, even though it is a mass market nowadays. I think that the exciting part in this blurb, at least, maybe not the most exciting thing you could have said about it, but the most exciting thing in the blurb is talking about the campaign structure and how it can evolve and those sorts of things. I think at the time that was a bit more unique and a bit more interesting. But then the yellow stuff, you really don't need all that. And then the red part at the end there is players must be careful, though, because over time they'll permanently lose cards from their hand. If they take too long to clear a dungeon, they may end up being exhausted and forced to retreat. You're getting into the weeds. Way too much detail.
Yeah. Okay.
This is another topic that I love. This is so fun. I love talking about my area of expertise. So
someday I'll find mine and I'll be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, all areas are my expertise. This one's just a special.
You know what mine is? Ted Lasso season 1.
And on YouTube soon.
Someday.
So, for demoing design, these are the things you want. Do you want to read them out?
Fast to set up, fast to teach, easy to understand, table presence, fun first time.
So this is what you need to do if you want me at a board game store that has demo copies to put your game up for a demo, or if I'm at a board game cafe and someone asks to play a game, the qualities I'm going to be looking at to decide whether or not that's the game I'm going to pull off the shelf to show someone. So, benefits of demoing. I'm going to go through this quickly because I feel like it should be obvious to most people. Someone who plays a demo first, way more likely to purchase a game. Most games are, if your game is good, then you want people to play it because people are going to...
It'll sell itself, yeah.
Yeah. And after a good play, people are way more likely to play it. You get way more exposure.
I mentioned last episode that we would run Village Pillage at conventions. Mm-hmm. On one hand, I'm a very, very good salesman. On the other hand, I'm a bad salesman because I just don't care enough about sales. And so we'd get like a round or two in, and people would be like, cool, I want to buy it. And I'm like, oh, you don't want to finish the game? Like, the point of the demo is to sell the game, but I like games so much that I'm like, the point of the game is to finish the game, and the sell, sure, buy a copy, but don't you want to see who wins?
Mm-hmm. And it gives players a feeling of being part of something. They have like some bit of like invested interest, especially I think when they play with the designer at a convention, like Peter was just saying, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And if you can, and I think this was also from the context of like getting you to demo your game at a friendly local game store. So it builds a rapport with the friendly local game store. If you're like, hey, I'll come in and I'll just do like a free demo session or something, and people can go to the event and play the games just as drop in or whatever. All right, so
the That Time You Killed Me box on the back, we mentioned it has like the 3 boards, the chess-looking boards, and something like this where you can play the game by pointing to it. Because in this game, you travel back in time, so I can point to a space and be like, look, you can move back to this, and it's like you can demo the game from the back of the box. We talked about this in the Cell Sheet episode as well. It's so useful. It's so useful. Crazy useful.
Yeah. All right, so demoing practically. Do you want to read the thing?
Yes. Clear, concise, give strategy sparingly, get them into the game quickly, be personable, don't goad them into saying nice things. That's an interesting one.
So this is as relevant for playtesting, I think, as is for demoing, but it's especially true of demoing games. So if you have a finished game in your hand and you're demoing at a con or something like that, you want the rules to be clear to people, but you also want to be concise. Don't go over edge cases. They're not important. You can tell them that if it comes up. Don't play the frickin' game for them. Don't be like, oh, you might want to do this because then this happens.
When I was demoing Village Pillage, I had a very specific way of doing it, which is I'd be like, okay, everyone, shuffle your hand and put one to the left, one to the right. That's not how you play. You choose, but for the sake of just getting into the game quickly, I just wanted stuff on the table so I could talk through how it worked. And then my mother, my mum is very lovely and supportive and 0% a gamer. So every time she has played Village Pillage, she has been overwhelmed by choice, and Village Pillage is not a heavy game at all. So she just shuffles her hand every turn. She'll shuffle her hand and put them out, and be like, "Oh, what does this do? What does this do?" And then about 7 rounds into a game once, she was like, "Man, I wish I'd played something else there." And I was like, "Mum, you can. You have that power. You don't have to shuffle each turn." So yeah, the putting out the cards at random and having them resolve. And then picking up and being like, cool, you actually pick. People like, oh man, that thing that happened, I can choose whether it happened. Like it was that's my favorite game I've designed to demo, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Very sweet as well. But you can say like, we're just gonna like do a practice and we're just play one of these cards and then just work off of that. And once they have done that first round, just be like, all right, we'll just keep going. It's a demo.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a tournament game.
Yeah. Let's get them into the game quickly. Be personable. Don't. That should be obvious. Don't be rude to people. Don't like belittle anything. Just try to be friendly.
You're Canadian though. It's different everywhere else.
True. And don't
be nice.
Don't go to them into saying nice things. If you're like
too pushy a salesman, is that the idea?
Yeah, like it turns people off really easily. Yeah. Personally, this I think might go too far, but I wouldn't even say, what did you think? Because you're right there. You're the designer. They're going to feel pressure to be like, oh, yeah, it was amazing. So do you want to buy the game? No.
One thing oh, crap, it's gone. This is not on your list, but get them touching things as quickly as possible.
Great.
Don't move for them. Like I said, I used to work in sales, and the number one trick in sales is have them hold the thing. So I would make excuses, like I'd be holding a product, they'd be like, "Sorry, can you hold this?" And I'd rearrange something arbitrarily. Once something's in their hand, they feel ownership over it.
Mhm.
This is way too specific for what we're talking about. But if you're demoing or playtesting your game, don't move the pieces for them. Be like, "Hey, move this piece to here." A, because it makes them invested, involved, and B, because it makes them be like, "Oh yes, the horse is that horse-shaped piece." It's not. They're not watching a play. They're playing a watch.
Yeah. And just one more quick thing for getting them into the game quickly. You want to teach them only what they need to know to start playing the game. You can teach them like the political phase once the political phase comes up.
Yeah.
You don't need to teach them every single thing before the game starts.
I've talked about this before, but I increasingly design to the pitch, to the teach. If you go back through my catalog, you'll see a bunch of games where it's like, okay, step 1 is going to be this thing. Now, this doesn't make sense yet, but it'll make sense in a bit. Okay, step 2. Now, this actually relates to step 4, which we haven't done. Nowadays, my games, as much as you can, the thing that you do first is all you need to know. The thing you do second only requires you to know the thing you did first. The thing you did third, same, like, don't require future knowledge, which sometimes makes the game a little bit less integrated, but it just makes the teach 1,000 times smoother.
Mm-hmm. So this is just a small anecdote of someone demoing their game and why it worked. Basically, they left a free copy at the store so people could play it if they want to. Cost me as a store owner nothing. I can do whatever with it if I want. And if they come in and run an event for me where they're demoing the game, that's great. Not all friendly local game stores will be down to that because their play space is valuable, especially at peak times like Saturdays and that kind of thing. But it's very cheap advertising. Like, what did the copy of the game cost you, right?
Yeah,
so
$3.
Exactly.
Critter Kitchen is launching to retail in April, and in about a month, the GAMA convention is happening, which is the Game Manufacturing Association. I believe, and I don't know this for sure, I believe Lucky Duck are giving every retailer a free copy.
Wow,
or
nice.
like hundreds anyway, like hundreds of free copies are going out. Like if you go to the show, don't quote me on this, but like something like everyone who goes to the show gets a free copy of this game that they can sell, or hopefully they will demo, but like it just immediately does what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so this is some very nitty gritty. I'm going to move through it quickly. This is mostly just like pet peeves as a retail person and things that you should do as a publisher specifically. So again, I'll go through it quickly. Pack your boxes, protect your corners. The number one cause of dents and dings is a corner of the box being bumped. So put corner protectors in there or cardboard. Common cause of damage is an X-Acto knife through the top. We expect that if we cut the tape on the top of the box, we're not cutting through the games, just put a piece of cardboard there or something. Again, dents and dings suck. Paper is great. You don't need to use plastic or anything like that. You can just use crumpled up paper. That's what Board Game Bliss uses 100% of the time when they ship out games, when they repack. It's always recyclable paper. And this part, I'm sorry, this part doesn't save the earth, but shrinking your games, at least at the time. Yeah, shrink wrapping your games.
Make smaller.
Is necessary. I know it sucks that you're using plastic. You can do paper if you want, but paper isn't transparent.
Some people are moving into paper these days.
Yeah, but paper isn't transparent, so you have to take it off when it goes on the shelf, which is an extra step. And the other problem is that it doesn't protect it when it's on the shelf because it can get shelf wear if it's picked up and put back on. Ideally, it'll sell if it gets picked up, but it doesn't happen all the time, and it's more likely to annoy the publisher than anything. Some publishers now are just doing like little tabs, little plastic sticky tabs. They've been doing that for years, but again, it can cause damage, and then we have to sell it as a damaged copy. It sucks. If I was a publisher, I would shrink wrap all the games, no question. Designing for demoing. So
that's what I was just talking about.
Yeah, Sakura arms. I think this was another demo section, or where I had
physical. Yeah,
prop section. So Sakura Arms is an atrocious game for demoing. It has a fair bit of setup. It's not clear what the strategy is right away. It takes more than one play to understand the fun part of it.
That's why no one likes it.
Yeah. The recommended ones, I know the number one is number 9. Have you ever played number 9?
The number stacking game, right?
Yes. Yeah, so it's a polyomino-esque stacking game of game points. I can teach that game in like 2 minutes. And
This is after your time, but I would put Boop up there.
oh yeah,
It's such a joy to teach.
but the biggest thing is not just thinking how good is it for the players, but think of how good is it for me as the person demoing the game. In number 9, the way that you play is you take off the lid, you shuffle the deck, and now you're ready. That's it. That's the entire setup, and it has an insert, so it's literally as easy as lid off. I said to someone, "Time me how long this takes to set up," and before they had pressed start on the timer, I was ready to begin. Like, that's incredible, and also because
have you played Boop?
I have not played Boop.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, Boop's not literally that fast, but it's not far off. Like, you know, checkers and chess, you have to set up the board.
Yep.
Boop, the board starts empty. So once you have the board out, you're finished setup.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a game that doesn't require setup, or you you play to like get things onto the board, that's awesome. A friend of the show, Michael Murray, was designing a game once where it was a 2-phase game, and phase 1 was basically like it was a full like strategy game, but you were basically seeding the board, and then the second half of the game, as you play, you're taking the board down. Such a clever idea. That would have demoed like crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, limited window of opportunity. You have a few weeks max before your game is old news, and nowadays less.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. So you have to make the most of it. You want to be on the BGG hotness. You want to make tacons. You want to have tastemakers and social media buzzing about your game. You have to hit the ground running, so when it gets to my store, there's already demand. I want people to be asking for the game before the game comes out. That's the goal. How do I recommend? So some of my slides are blank. That one's blank. And it has been many years, so I don't remember what I said on the slide or what it's relevant, so I'm going to skip it. Games I wish I could...
You can get a full refund for this episode if you so desire.
Games I wish I could recommend. This one is also blank, but I can tell you Clank is on that list. Clank is one where it just takes too long to set up. You have to seed too many things, but it's a fun game. And again, I wish I had more examples of this sort of thing. But just think of how long does it take to set up? How long does it take to teach? And then when it's set up, how long does it take to reset between plays? Because if I want to demo it multiple times over a day, then that's a huge pain. Yeah. And also, very importantly, how fun is just playing a couple turns? If I have to play the whole game to get it, bad demo game. If I can play a few turns of it and be like, oh, I already like this game, great. That's awesome. Because then the person can buy it and move on and interrupt you, like Peter was just pointing out too. Something like Santorini doesn't take long to play a few turns and get a feel for it, and it has great table presence. Great one. I'm going to skip over the swear word quickly. Why was
your prototype?
yeah. Well, I was showing why some of my other designs were bad for demoing, and what makes them...
probably the asymmetry.
Mm-hmm. So Colossus was one where it was a good example of one. I don't have a picture of it, but basically that one was the board itself is a player. You were playing as the board. It was this giant Shadow of the Colossus style monster, and you were moving it around as you played. So that had incredible table presence. So in that way, it was fantastic for demo game. And in the teach, it was terrible because it was highly asymmetric and way too complex, that sort of thing. Yeah. Again, sorry, I don't have all my slides here.
Just make a great game. Just make a great game.
So these are games that I listed that do well in spite of them not following all the great principles.
Saying. Yeah. Sort of like the GMT cover, but yeah.
Yeah. So High Society is just such an interesting player dynamic. People like immediately on the first turn, they're like, wait, I can bid however much I want, but I don't want to bid everything because if I have nothing, then I lose. So interesting. Lost Cities, where you have that immediate tension. It doesn't have a great selling point. I don't have like a hook to give someone about that game, but it's just so interesting that if I sit down with people and I'm like, just trust me, they will have a good time. Yeah. World Championship Russian Roulette is one where...
I know this game.
This is, I think, the most underrated game I've ever played. We'll definitely play it next time you come. It's a high excitement, push your luck bluffing game, and it's awesome. I tell everyone about it. That was a game that sold 0 copies online or close to it, and I sold like dozens and dozens in store. Jaipur. Jaipur is another one where it's like, how do you explain Jaipur in a way that sounds like really sexy to someone? Like, I can't.
The best
do
I
it.
have is it's a 2-player game.
Yeah, but again, you sit down, it's a great game,
So good.
and because it's so good, it self procreates. So
it's annoying to set up. That's the biggest problem with that game.
that is true. The insert helps a little bit, but it's still de-setting up is also annoying. And then Sack Arms is just my example because it's so good that I push it on everyone, even though it wasn't that popular. There we go.
Okay. Props to bring.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny.
Can I get you to duck back? There's a bullet point list right before we split between the episodes. So at the start of basically what I just want to spend a few minutes. I know we're running long, but I want to spend a few minutes distilling what you've done and turning it into actionable advice for designers, because you're coming out from the self-publishing retailer, not self-publishing retailer. You know what I'm trying to say. And I think that one of the things that this show really tries to focus on is what are some actionable steps that you can do as a designer to meet this. Can you take us back to the slide? I don't have any notes. Can you take us back to the slide that had the play account and weight and components? I think I had some stuff around that.
Yeah, just give me a sec.
Yep. While you hunt that, I wrote down a note. Oh yeah, so I'm going to talk about all play again, but I'm also going to talk about button shy. You when we had Exploding Kittens on, possibly last episode, who knows? It's all blurred together for me. They said, what was it, 2 minutes to teach, 15 minutes to play. All play do a line that they call, I can't remember what it's called, easy to play or something like that. And they all have the same font on the front, and Mountain Goats is in that line. So if you know Mountain Goats, they are all exactly that. They are games that will teach in less than a minute, and then we'll play in about 15, 20 minutes. That is so valuable to publishers. So like if you're looking for ways to increase your chances of getting signed, designing, and it's hard. It's really hard to design something that is fun and takes a minute to teach. But if you can do that, it's killer. And then Button Shy have the Simply Solo line. Now, this one you can't pitch to because it's all games by Scott Alms, but it's the same thing. It's solo games in 18 cards that take no time to learn, or like very little time to learn. Simply Solo. So just something to think about as a designer.
I don't think this was what you're talking about, was it?
No, it wasn't that. Maybe go to the present, maybe? Like the gift?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so recommendation. What was I thinking here? I just want to take some of this stuff and so yeah, okay. Let's use this one, and then we'll probably have to wrap up or we'll have some fun. So this ties back to what I was saying last episode about that last stage pitch. When you are building a game, this entire list you should be thinking about, and specifically product cohesion. So we talk a lot about product design. Product cohesion is so important. And I think this is why it translated to, also related to the slide that had playtime and component quality and all that. Like, if you look at all those as disparate items, you can end up with this ridiculous Frankenstein game that doesn't do what anyone's looking for. Yeah,
Perceived value?
So, yeah, that's the one. Thank you. So size, weight, component quality, length of play, flexibility. This is not 5 disparate, separate items. These should be in as close to perfect alignment as you can have, where the weight and the length of play should be connected. The component quality is, like we were saying earlier, like we had a little debate about, hyper relevant. If you are making a game for that $40 hobby gamer, easy to get into, it's tactical strategy, you can play it 100 times, component quality is really important for that audience in a way that maybe it's not as important for a different type of game. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, like this slide particularly, I think, is, as a designer, one of the most valuable things in this whole presentation, because you want to think about your game from that top-down level. Look at a game on the find a popular game in what you're trying to make. So I'll use Veil of Eternity. Do you know that one? The card drafting engine builder that got really hot about a year ago. I didn't like it. Everyone else loved it. But as a product, like if you're making something for that market, pull out that game or pull it up on BGG and directly compare. Are you a similar weight? Are you a similar length of play? Do you have a similarly flexible player count? If you're making a light Veil of Eternity game that only plays 3 players, you're going to struggle. If you're making a heavy tactical game that only plays 3 players, that's actually got a better chance of succeeding because it's already niched down in a way that Veil of Eternity wants to be as open as possible. Like, does this make sense?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, pop back to the gifts.
I want to pause for 1 second and do not comment on perceived value.
Yep.
Where was that slide with? Whatever. I'm not gonna bother trying to find the exact slide, but so in my example, I talked about pitch car, but near that one, I also had Burgle Bros. Are you familiar with Burgle Bros?
Yes, the Tim Powers game.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting talking point. Burgle Bros is very, very, very dense. It is in the smallest possible box it can be, and it is heavy as heck. So you might think, oh, the two kind of balance each other out. It's really heavy, but it's small, so people are going to understand that it's got value to it. But people still feel weird about spending, at the time, 40 Canadian, nowadays, I don't know, 60, on a tiny little box, even if it has the same components as a bigger box. And worse than that, if you're selling this game online, people don't feel the physical weight. So the weight of the game doesn't factor into those decisions. People only have the thumbnail to work off of. So if they see it's a $40, $60 game, and then they Google what it is, like, or Google a picture of the components or something, and see it with a reference item, then they might be like, wow, that's tiny, that's so expensive, that's overpriced, and not realize that it's because there is zero space at all besides the components.
And this also, sort of like the Button Shy example, he's not making it for retail. He's not even making it for post-Kickstarter sale. I mean, he wants those sales, but he's making it for Kickstarter. And if you're fulfilling a Kickstarter, having a big box destroys your budget. Like,
yes,
it is so expensive to ship a big box, even if it's light. It's the size that matters. Mm-hmm. So he was not making that game for retail. I think similarly, paperback, like all of his games, are made for Kickstarter. And so they don't exactly align with what the retailers want because that wasn't the initial audience. It's a fascinating little subset of business.
Very good call out.
So something like, for some reason I want to dive into that. But yeah, I think, again, just like, you never talked about your design document.
Yeah, I have that in an alternate tab. I was going to use that as the as the publisher get tip.
Perfect.
Whatever.
Okay, great. So this and the previous one we showed about perceived value. If you're at the point of seriously pitching your game, or ideally at the point of starting to design your game, then, or if you're pitching your game, you're struggling, a list like this or the perceived value is really helpful just to see where there's a mismatch. I was, you've probably heard this story. I was shown a game that had 200 dice, 150 dice, like 150 dice, and it played in 8 minutes. And there is just a huge disconnect there between what that is going to have to cost and the play experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you are making, if you don't know your theme player count and whether it's a strategy game or a party game, what are you doing? Like, so similar to what we talked about last time, you need this alignment of product. And some people are going to be like, well, that's the publisher's job. Cool. But if you want to get in with the publisher, the more of this work you can do, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Price range is such an important thing to start thinking about. What do you want your game to cost? Veil of Eternity, I think, is $30 US. It knows exactly what it is, and it hits that audience, and it did really well. If that game had been $50, wouldn't have done well. If it had been $20, it might have done well, but it would have actually felt too cheap for what that audience is looking for. It's such a specific thing. So if you start by thinking about what else is on the market like yours, cool, what price should your game be? And then not work backwards. I'm not saying start with a $sign and then start designing from there. But very early on in my process, I will have a mental list of these things and make sure that they are at least broadly in alignment. And then, game design is asking yourself 1,000 questions. And a lot of them, it doesn't matter which way you go. There's so many things in the game that we're working with AG where, we could do A or B, and it's not going to tangibly improve or detriment the product. It's just you need a North Star, you need a guiding light. And so having that vision, that alignment right from the start just makes it easier. We've talked about this a lot before. I do this by having a publisher in mind. I will think about which publisher, and then every time I have a choice like that, I'm like, well, what would this publisher do? Oh, okay, I'll do that. And if it's best for the game to go in the other direction, I'll go in the other direction. But by the end of it, I have a very cohesive, aligned product and game. And it's a big reason that I sign as much as I do.
Absolutely. All right, do you want to go into the get your game published tip?
No, we're going to have some fun. It's time for fun, AJ.
What? We do the fun first?
Yeah. Oh. We literally just did it.
Who knew? All right, let's do it. Let's have some fun.
What is your favorite word? Going for a nice quick one. So over time.
English or non-English? I feel like we've done this one before.
Have we? Give me both. What's the answers?
My favorite non-English one is ikigai, which is a Japanese concept that means reason for being. And if you Google ikigai, actually, I can just share my screen.
We have the technology.
I mean, the audio listeners will have to have it described, but that's fine. Okay, so...
Okay, AJ's pulled up a screen. It's a guy who looks really icky. Huh. That's not what I expected at all.
All right, so...
oh, yes. You've shown me this diagram before. I don't know if it was on the podcast.
All right, so basically, it's a Venn diagram. You know how much Pierre loves Venn diagrams. And it's talking about like your purpose for being. So on the one axis, it's what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, what you're good at. And the goal is to find something that can fulfill all of them, and that is your ikigai. So, for instance, if you have something you love and you have something you're good at, you found a passion. But if you can't get paid for it and the world doesn't need it, then it's a passion that may not amount to anything.
It's great. Hobbies are great, but it's not ikigai.
Yeah. And if you have something that you love and something that the world needs, you have a mission. But if you're not any good at it and you can't make any money from it, and so, yeah. I think about this concept a lot, and I kind of thought I had this at my last job, but I think it's just because my last job was so much better than my previous jobs, and it was good for me in a lot of ways. Like, I'm not upset with that job that I had at the board game store. I really loved working there, but designing games, that is my ikigai. I am good at it now. I think.
What's it called if you have like 4 ikigais?
You are the Iki master.
Oh, I'm the Iki gang.
And I don't know what my answer was initially for my favorite English word, but my favorite English word currently is palindrome spelled backwards, which means a word that is a different word if it's spelled the same backwards and forwards, like palindrome, which is great.
Mine, if we did this before, this will be familiar, is actually, I just like the mouth sound. I just think your mouth goes on such a journey when you say actually. It's a delight. So AJ, do you have a publisher tip ready?
I do. In that,
but by publisher tip, this is a new section where we give you a tip on how to get published, is the goal.
Yes. So this is a bit of a stretch, but we teased it last episode / the first half of this one, and we wanted to go over it. So this is a design outline. This is what I do when I start my games. I fill this out, and then I have an idea of what I'm making. Do you want to read through it, or shall I?
Yeah, I thought this was much more detailed. Didn't you redo it for the Discord?
This is the redone one.
Wow.
It's not complicated.
So the 4 headings are Vision, Hooks, Publishers, Brainstorm.
Yep.
Vision is, what is the elevator pitch? Why is this exciting? Hooks are thematic, mechanic, component, other. Publishers is blank, but I assume you would list like 3 or 4. And then Brainstorm, mechanics / systems. What does the term look like? Objective?
Yeah, so this isn't like, obviously it's not filled out and all that, but this is the skeleton that I used to start. More so, it's more relevant for co-designing, but I find it helpful in general nowadays. And I never used to really do this. I would write like the vision, but nowadays I think it's helpful to think about all the things and how it ties together. So for the vision, to me, that's the North Star. That's what you do first. And anytime you have a question, you refer back to that. And that way you don't lose sight of what it is that you're actually making, which can absolutely happen. So what's the elevator pitch for the game? You start with that. What is it going to say at the top of the sell sheet? Or what do you say to someone when they're like, oh, what type of game is this? This is the place for that. And that can change, but having something to start is really valuable, I think. And then why is this exciting? This is, to me, like the hook should sort of, or the vision should be sort of self-explanatory.
Let's use our AG game just because we don't talk about it enough.
Sure.
So my gut, like whenever I'm talking about this game, the elevator pitch I use is it's a asymmetric dueling game where the factions are completely asymmetrical. One person's playing a bag building game, the other person's playing Mancala. One person's playing a hidden movement, the other person's playing pick up and deliver, but on a shared central board, and they all integrate perfectly.
And it takes 30 minutes to play and less than 10 minutes to teach. I think those are huge selling points that I always include in that, but on that completely. Why is this exciting?
I I often describe it, this is in informal context, as gamer crack. The fact that the asymmetrical factions work seamlessly together is really exciting to gamers because they get to play these like sort of root style, vastly different things, vastly, no pun intended, in the same board, and it is endlessly replayable, which is exciting to me. So that's why I mention it, because we've got 6 factions so far, and there'll be many more to come, and every 2 factions is a wildly different experience.
Yeah, I think a few things for me that add to the excitement is it's so easy to teach, but I think very replayable. But just the whole nature of the game is like different combinations every time, and each faction basically works as an expansion for the other one. And I had one other thing that I thought was really exciting about it, but it slipped my mind now. Yeah, I think there's a lot that's exciting about this game. Then we go down to hooks. So I think this one actually has a lot of hooks. What do you think is the thematic hook?
So I think thematic is the weakest of our hooks in that. I agree. The thing that appeals to me is that every faction is themed after a bug, and we have done the meticulous like theming to make it match that bug's pattern. So like the bees are picking up pollen and delivering it back to the hive, and if you attack with the drone dies. Like we have gone deep into making to the point of like not arguing with the publisher, but really insisting, no, we want it to be this way because it makes sense for this insect. So for me, it's like, and you're going to have a very different answer, which is why I'm not stepping on that. But for me, it's the integration between bugs and the mechanics, I think, is really strong. And yeah, so not only specific mechanics, but like when you're playing the locusts, you are building up a bunch of stuff and swarming them, so you feel like a locust.
Perfectly good answer. I think of this again as the weakest one, and I think of this as a unique spin on traditional fantasy. So a lot of traditional fantasy, like mages and soldiers fighting it out, and this one is the spin of their fantasy warriors that are really small, riding on insects as though they're mounts. Like instead of horses, you're riding a dragonfly kind of thing. And so I think that's very evocative and a unique spin on traditional fantasy stuff that's got the sort of thing we talk about where it's half similar, half new, right?
Yeah.
Mechanic. Now, this is interesting.
I mean, this is the big one. It's the asymmetry. The asymmetry. It's a dueling game, so in the style of Neuroshima Hex, which has some asymmetry. Absolutely, that was a point of inspiration for us. But it makes it more asymmetrical than I think any dueling game has ever been, while still being super accessible and super smooth.
And super interactive. To me, it's the combination of I think this is the exciting thing I didn't mention. It's the combination of very asymmetric and very interactive and easy to learn. Because if you name any asymmetric game, if you name any asymmetric game, you can have 2 of the 3. Like Bast, super interactive.
Super asymmetrical, impossible to teach.
Exactly.
You need to know what everyone else can do before you can take your turn.
Yeah. And in this one, the way that you take turns is you just choose an action tile and do what it says. Literally, just read the thing and do the thing. And those 4 action tiles are unique to each faction. You shuffle and mix them up and snap them together. And when you take a turn, you take your action tile, and then the one that's across from it, your opponent gets to do for free. So it has built-in counterplay where you can sort of see what the opponent's doing.
Yeah.
So, I think there's multiple mechanical hooks, part of why this got signed by AEG, right? But also good answer.
Each faction has its own like little mechanical hooks, but the kind of geeky game designer mechanical hook is the coupling mechanism, where
Yep.
You have 4 powers, I have 4 powers. We shuffle my 4 and lay them randomly under your 4. For that entire game, those are linked. Whenever you use your power, I use my matching power. Whenever I use my power, you use your matching power. It makes any two game, like, again, this is not what you'd put on the box or go on like social media to talk about, but as a designer, that's the mechanical hook. Like talking to designers, which hopefully, if you're a listener, you are. If not, get out of here. You're not welcome. We don't want you.
Well, I mean,
so what are you doing? This is 2 hours. This is 2 hours long. Why are you still here, non-designer?
I really like this to publishers. This is, I think, very useful to publishers, especially new publishers. Component hook. What would you say the component hook is? Because I have a very specific thing in mind.
For me, it's the maps, and maybe that's what yours is as well. Okay, you want to explain it?
Yeah, so the way that you play the game is you don't just pull out a board. Each faction is completely component independent from every other faction. You take the 2 boards, mine and yours, and you snap them together, and that creates the unique board that you're playing on. So not only are the factions unique in terms of like their gameplay mechanics that you're playing against and everything, but the way that your faction interacts even on the board changes. So for instance, the bees, they harvest pollen from flowers. They're playing a pick up and deliver game. So if your opponent has flowers in a particularly weird spot, that completely changes how the bees are going to play against them.
What I like about this is, again, from a nerdy design perspective, is that it is in alignment with the central hook. And I think I gave my seed metaphor at one point where like we started with a premise and everything grew out of that premise. Everything grew out of that seed. And the fact that like my board and your board work differently than any other 2 combinations of board, and we've blended this as hard as we can with each faction, makes every faction even more asymmetrical. Like every faction pairing, I should say. It just further emphasizes that core hook.
Yeah, every single thing about this game is as asymmetric as it can be, but the games tie into each other really nicely. Do you think there's any other hooks that we have for this one?
I think that the expandability is a hook. I think that is, for me anyway, like knowing that these 6 factions, what's the combination there? 6 factorial. As soon as we release another 6 factions, now it's 12 factorial, which, if you know math, is way more than twice as many. Like, not even close.
Yeah, I think that this will really appeal to people who like CCGs and those sorts of the games because they're already 2-player dueling games and stuff like that. But rather than like choosing your deck, you're choosing which faction you want to play and that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And every time a faction comes out, again, it's like an expansion for each of your existing ones because they play so differently paired with each other. And one thing we're finding that's really interesting in playtesting is just how much, playing on this map against this faction, this ability I have is 10 times as good.
Yeah.
And, we need to get those in line, but it's fair.
Yeah.
So then publishers, we did talk about this initially.
Yeah. We designed this with all play in mind. I love working with all play. You've heard me mention them 2,000 times this episode. I pitched it to Joe. He doesn't like dueling games. It was just a non-starter. As well as that, the expandability for Joe was actually a huge turnoff. Do you know the company? Do you know the game Dice Throne by Roxley Games?
Yep.
They made Dice Throne huge hit. Gavin, the owner of Roxley, spun off Dice Throne into its own company, which he is a minority owner. Because Dice Throne became its own beast that needed constant maintenance, not maintenance, but new content and so on and so forth. Roxley would have been the Dice Throne company, and that's not what he was interested in doing. So he spun that off. He still has ownership, but it's now run by people who just do Dice Throne. That's all they do full time. All Play don't want to be the Battle Bugs company. They want to be the wide. They have a million different games company. They don't want to have to put a team to one company and just make Battle Bugs content. Yeah. That's just so unappealing to them that was actually the fact that it was a dueling game and the fact that it was expandability was the big turnoff. But when we were making decisions, the $20 box size I was talking about, every decision we made was to fit 2 factions into that $20 box.
And our other publishers that we had as backups were Leader and AEG. Leader ended up passing just because they had too many games in their pipeline. And obviously AEG signed it. So that worked out great. So this is the brainstorm part. So, okay, we understand the selling points and everything. What does the nitty-gritty look like? What do the mechanics and systems look like? What does a turn look like? What's the objective? I don't know that we need to go into that.
I think we've talked about this before. That first one took us a while to get into because we just had different visions. And that's why this is part of the vision document, because I wanted little mini games off the main board. AJ wanted the game to be 100% on the main board. We ended up, I think, pretty evenly compromising between the two. But our mechanical visions were incompatible, and we had to go back and forth, 4 times before we finally found found the ability to see what the other person was seeing.
And I think maybe this is an interesting anecdote where, because so many asymmetric games are so non-interactive, or there's so many elements where it's like, I look over at your board and you're playing root, and I'm like, you have the moles, and I'm like, what do you even have over there? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? That was a huge turnoff for me. So I think I pushed really far in the other direction, where if you were playing against the Quacks of Quedlinburg style game, then you could do things to mess with their bag. And the other one, similarly, you could interact with all the elements of each other. And it turned out that was just too much, and that was too frustrating to deal with. And because we already had so much so many interaction points in the rest of the game, that last step wasn't necessary and just was frustrating to get there. So
you might not remember, but you also literally didn't want anything that wasn't on the board.
I don't remember that, but that does sound like me. I do remember the tombstones and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. The version I made was ants versus spider or something like that. Where I was like, look, the only way that we can make it all on the board is to essentially make an asymmetrical abstract game where I am playing an abstract game and you're playing a slightly different abstract game. And if literally everything is on the board, it has to be an abstract game because there's no other way that I can see to do it. And so I built that out, and it absolutely played. And you were like, "Oh, this is not what I want to make." not in a rude way, but I wanted the stuff off the board. You're like, "No, it all has to be on the board." So I was like, "I will make that, and I will make that to the best of my ability." And we played it. You were like, "You made it. You made it about as well as it can be made." Not what I want.
Yep.
There's a quote from screenwriting. The executive. It's an executive. He says, "I asked you for a brown suit, and you went away and you made a brown suit, and you brought me a brown suit, and the second I saw it, I realized I wanted a blue suit."
Yep.
It's a inevitable part of the process. Like, no one's wrong in that situation. You just don't know that you don't want it until you see it. Yep. AJ, I have a deep personal question for you.
What's up?
How do we end this podcast?
By saying goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone!
Thanks for joining us. You can find us and our incredible Discord community in the show notes, or reach out to us privately at funproblemspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend.